We are joint heirs with the Messiah. We have become sons and daughters of God, part of his spiritual family. The New Testament doesn't quote this specific verse, but we're his brothers and sisters. We are joint heirs. We are now sons and daughters of God. He says, I'm going to my Father and your Father, my God and your God. We are part of his spiritual seed, part of his spiritual offspring, and that spiritual metaphorical usage of Zerah is even found within the book of Isaiah. There in a negative context, here in a positive context. He will see offspring, prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. There have been some, even Jewish scholars, that have sought to amend the text, and they don't even have seed there. He'll see the arm of the Lord, etc. But just as written, there's no reason to struggle with it. After the suffering of his soul, he'll see the light, or he'll see and be satisfied. The Dead Sea Scrolls indicate that it's a seeing the light of life, another resurrection concept, and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Some argue, well, that can't refer to Jesus because he doesn't justify us by his knowledge, but by his blood. Again, it's one of these funny things like, well, didn't they just confess that it's by him being pierced and wounded, etc., that it's for our transgression? So is that all thrown out now? Again, it's one of these strange things where you even have to have the verses within the same chapter contradicting themselves to come up with an argument. I don't mean to belittle those that don't see Yeshua here, but to not see him, you've got to really come up with a convoluted argument. It reminds me of one of these cases where it goes to court, and the evidence is so absolutely, undeniably clear that the only way out is to try to say the person's been completely framed, because all the evidence is against them. The only way to change it is to say the people themselves weren't trustworthy. They're all lying. Everybody's lying. It's all a conspiracy against you. They're all lying. It's all falsified. That's the only way you can do it with this. So what's the answer? By his knowledge, some would even render based on the Arabic cognate, in other words, the Arabic equivalent for the Hebrew yada, to know. There have been arguments made that it refers to suffering. These are by some of the top scholars, Hebrew scholars through the years. Some would render it by his suffering. Some would render it by his obedience. Even it's by his knowledge, fine with me. By his knowing God and making God known, he brings justification. I mean, this is, again, one of these things where someone raises the objection and you have to say, all right, please tell me again what the problem is, because I really don't see a problem here. And look, what does it go on to say? Not because he's so smart he's going to justify everybody. He's going to bear their iniquities. There's that concept again, the sin-bearing, carrying the iniquities on his shoulders. Intercession. Doing what only the high priest could do, but doing it in a way beyond what any high priest could do. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death. Sounds like he died again. And was numbered with the transgressors. Sure fits our Yeshua. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. I want to be as candid as I can be with you, okay? I really want to try to open my heart and say this. When I read literature that opposes our faith, or when I read other Christian literature that holds to different positions than I hold to, I'm not talking about some cult or some weird out there thing, but I really do my best to understand the objections. I really do my best to identify with the objections. I was telling a class I was teaching at our School of Ministry, at Fire School of Ministry in North Carolina, that in order to really answer an objection well, you first have to understand it. You have to be able to restate it to the person. So in other words, are you saying this? And the second thing, if you really want to answer it effectively, you have to feel the weight of it. You have to feel the weight of it. In other words, when a Muslim comes and tells you, I can't believe for this reason and that, you go, that's easy. Well, if it was so easy to him, then it wouldn't be such a life and death struggle. You have to feel the weight of it. In various areas of ministry where I deal with people, I do my best to do that. Now, here's the problem. It's painful to feel the weight of it. It's painful to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes because now you're seeing the objection from their viewpoint. It's challenging your own faith. If you want to feel the weight of it, it has to hit you in a way that challenges you, that raises questions. Now the question is, do I have honest answers? Do I have honest answers? So I have done my best through the years, with this passage in particular, which I take a lot of time on, not because it's so wonderfully powerful and plain, but because the anti-missionaries take a lot of time on it. And I'm not trying to go through every possible each line, et cetera, because some of them are so silly that they don't even merit an answer. And others I've dealt with at greater length in Volume 3. But I've really done my best to put myself in the rabbi's shoes and traditional Jewish shoes and read it and feel it. I had a rabbi tell me recently, I wrote a paper at a Christian apologetics conference explaining how there is a blind spot in Christian apologetics for Jewish apologetics. And I explained how our witness sounds to a traditional Jew. I explained it. I said, this is how the traditional Jew responds, etc. I sent it to my friend, this ultra-Orthodox rabbi that I dialogue with every week. And he called me and said, that is the best thing I've ever read that explains why Jews don't believe. He said, it's better than any anti-missionary literature I ever read. He said, I'd like to excerpt it. He said, I won't do it because it's yours. He said, I'd like to excerpt it and expand on it and put it on the internet. I said, so you know that I understand. He goes, oh yeah, I know you understand. I'd gotten a little rundown last year and had to cancel out one of our Wednesday night talks, and he sent me a note wishing me a speedy healing and said, hey, we need you. So next time we talked, I said, what did you mean, we need you? I said, obviously you think one day I'm going to come around to your position, then I'll be of great help in spreading some kind of spiritual revival among our people. He said, yeah, that. I said, but what else? He goes, well, you understand. He said, you're the only one I know that understands. Now, of course, there are plenty, but just in his dialogue and interaction, you understand our position, you understand where we're coming from, you can feel it. One time, I was scheduled to do a debate with my friend Shmuley Boteach. It was really before we were getting to know each other as friends, and he had a radio show. And he asked me to come on, and his co-host, a Jamaican man, it was just kind of an interesting mix, a black Jamaican and a white American rabbi doing this radio show together. And the co-host said, okay, so what's Shmuley's issue with you? Why doesn't he agree with you? Why doesn't he believe in Jesus? So I began to give all of the arguments. So Shmuley said, hey, Mike, I don't need to show up for the debate. You can take my side. You can take the position. I really do understand. I've really felt the weight of these. If I've ever said anything or presented anything in a superficial way, I've been quick to try to understand it, embrace it, take it in. To the point that things have even messed with me because I have so clearly stated the objection and felt it that now I said, okay, what is the answer? And having gone through this passage over and over in so many dialogues and so many debates and so many pages and so many tapes and back and forth, I read it again and I think, how could anyone not see Jesus? I'm just being as honest as I read it and think, how could anyone not recognize this is Yeshua? It has to be